New Mexico's vast wilderness, rugged mountain ranges, and remote forests have long been the setting for reports of strange encounters. The following cases come from the BFRO archives and involve witnesses who describe seeing large, unexplained creatures or hearing unusual sounds in some of the state's most isolated areas. Whether you believe these reports point to an unknown species, mistaken identity, or something else entirely, these are the stories as reported by the witnesses themselves. Encounter 1. BFRO Report 34460 Class A, Chusca Mountains, McKinley County, New Mexico, July 16, 2011. On the night of July 16, 2011, a family was making the drive into the Chusca Mountains on the Navajo Reservation for a family reunion. It was approximately 12:30 in the morning when they left the paved roadway near Narbona Pass and headed south on a dirt road leading deeper into the mountains. The weather had recently been wet from light rain, and the dirt road was still damp. Above them, however, the sky had cleared. A bright full moon illuminated the landscape, making it possible to see far beyond the reach of their headlights. As the family traveled roughly 5 to 8 miles into the mountains, they approached a small hill where the road curved sharply to the south. At the top of the rise was a flat green pasture bordered by pine forest. A small rain-fed pond sat beside the road. As the driver rounded the curve, something immediately caught his attention. Standing near the pond was a large, dark figure. The full moon was directly behind it, creating a black silhouette against the bright sky. At first, the witness could only make out its outline. He estimated the figure was about 75 feet away. He asked his wife if she had seen it. She wasn't sure at first, but as they moved closer, she also focused on the strange shape standing beside the water. Neither of them could identify what they were looking at. The figure remained perfectly still. What made the sight even stranger was the reflection visible in the pond. The witness could see both the moon and the silhouette reflected in the water. Wanting a better look, he slowly steered the truck toward the edge of the road so the headlights would illuminate the figure directly. The instant the beam swept across it, the creature reacted. According to both witnesses, it turned and began moving uphill toward the trees. They watched it run on 2 legs with a smooth and surprisingly graceful stride. The witness later described the movement as almost ninja-like because of how quickly and effortlessly it covered the distance. Within seconds, it disappeared into the forest. At its closest point, the family estimated they were only about 30 feet away. The witnesses stated they could clearly see 2 arms and 2 legs. They saw no clothing, no reflective objects, and nothing suggesting it was a person. It also did not move like a bear. They estimated the creature stood between 7 and 8 feet tall and appeared much broader than an average human. After it vanished, silence filled the truck. Then their oldest daughter suddenly cried out from the back seat. To their surprise, she had been awake the entire time and had witnessed the encounter as well. Frightened, she repeatedly asked her father what the creature had been. The family remained shaken as they continued their drive. The next day, they returned to the location hoping to find evidence. They searched around the pond and along the hillside where the creature had run. They found tracks from deer, cattle, and dogs, but the ground where the figure had disappeared was hard-packed and revealed no obvious footprints. What remained with the witnesses most was the feeling that the creature had been aware of them long before they noticed it. According to the witness, it appeared to begin turning away before the headlights ever reached it, almost as if it knew what they were about to do. Prior to this experience, the couple considered themselves skeptics. After that moonlit encounter in the Chusca Mountains, they were no longer so certain. Encounter 2, BFRO Report 28964, Class A, near Thoreau, McKinley County, New Mexico, March 7, 2011. On the evening of March 7, 2011, a man was driving home from work in Gallup, New Mexico. His route took him along Highway 612 through national forest land south of Thoreau. Winter conditions had left the roadway icy and snow-covered, and snow continued to fall as darkness settled over the landscape. At approximately 8:00 p.m., the witness was exiting a series of sharp curves when he noticed movement along the right side of the road. Initially, he thought he was looking at an unusually tall person. As he approached, however, he realized something was wrong. The figure appeared much larger than any person he had ever seen. Before he could fully process what he was looking at, the creature began crossing the road directly in front of his truck. The witness estimated that he came within only a few feet of striking it. The creature stopped briefly, allowing him to see it clearly through the passenger side window. According to the witness, the face appeared both human and ape-like at the same time. He estimated the figure stood around 7 feet tall. As it approached the truck, its height became even more apparent. He reported that when it came alongside the vehicle, he could no longer see its face because it stood so high above the cab. At that moment, fear took over. The witness said he felt completely overwhelmed and did not want to stop, especially with the road covered in ice and snow. Instead, he continued driving and headed straight home. Even years later, he remained convinced that what he encountered that snowy night was not a human being. Encounter 3, BFRO report. Ma 1266, Class A, near Rock Springs, McKinley County, New Mexico, September 17, 2002. Late on the night of September 17, 2002, a utility worker responded to reports of a water outage affecting residents in the Rock Springs area. After checking a storage tank northwest of town, he began driving back toward Highway 264 along a dirt access road. It was approximately 11:45 p.m. The sky was clear, but there was no moonlight. The only illumination came from his truck's headlights cutting through the darkness. As he drove, he was focused on diagnosing the cause of the outage. Suddenly, something stepped from behind a juniper tree about 20 yards ahead of his vehicle. The witness immediately stopped. The creature paused in the headlights and turned toward him. For several seconds, they appeared to be looking directly at one another. The witness described the creature as standing approximately 7 feet tall with a shiny brown coat covering its body. Its face reminded him of a monkey with large dark eyes that seemed almost teardrop-shaped. The head appeared unusually pointed toward the back. The creature then resumed moving. Rather than crossing directly, it traveled diagonally across the road in long strides. The witness estimated it crossed the entire roadway in only 4 steps before disappearing behind another juniper tree. He remained stopped, hoping it might reappear. It never did. As he sat alone in the darkness, a growing sense of fear settled over him. He later recalled locking both doors and avoiding even looking out his side window because he suddenly felt vulnerable. Eventually, he accelerated toward the highway and continued his work assignment. The following day, he returned with a coworker. Together, they discovered a line of footprints spaced roughly 4 to 5 feet apart. The tracks led eastward into brush and sandy soil. Photographs of the prints were reportedly taken along with drawings the witness created to document what he had seen. To this day, he remains convinced that the strange figure crossing the road was unlike any known animal in the area. Encounter 4, BFR report number 28886, Class A, near Tres Piedras, Taos County, New Mexico, February 20th, 2011. Late on the night of February 20th, 2011, a couple was driving north on U.S. Highway 285 after returning from Espanola, New Mexico. The drive toward Antonito, Colorado, was quiet. Snow had fallen in parts of the area earlier in the evening, though the roadway where the sighting occurred was dry and clear. Sometime between 10:00 and 11:00 p.m., the couple approached a section of highway near Tres Piedras, where rock walls bordered both sides of the road. Without warning, they noticed a dark figure standing ahead. As they drew closer, the figure began moving. The witnesses described it as a large black human-like shape standing more than 6 feet tall. It crossed from the east side of the highway to the west with surprising speed. What stood out most was the way it moved. According to the witnesses, its gait resembled that of a gorilla, yet it remained upright as it crossed the roadway. The creature disappeared into the darkness before they could get a longer look. Although the sighting lasted only moments, it left a strong impression on both witnesses. They later described the experience as frightening and urged travelers to remain alert when driving through isolated stretches of highway at night. Encounter 5, BFRO report number 1607, Class B, Gallegos Peak area, Taos County, New Mexico, October 23, 2006. During the first week of October 2006, 2 experienced hunters were camped near Gallegos Peak in northern New Mexico. The area sat at approximately 9,500 feet in elevation and consisted of dense pine forest, open meadows, valleys, and mountain ridges. On the evening of October 2nd, one of the hunters was making his way back to camp after a day in the field. As he moved through the forest, he suddenly heard a strange scream or howl echoing through the mountains. The sound immediately caught his attention. Having hunted elk, deer, bear, mountain lions, and turkey for many years, he was familiar with the noises made by local wildlife. This sound was different. When he arrived back at camp, his friend mentioned experiencing something unusual as well. Earlier that evening, he had heard what sounded like two sticks being struck together repeatedly somewhere in the forest. The first hunter chose not to mention the howl he had heard. The next morning, October 3rd, he returned to the same area before sunrise. After sitting quietly for over an hour, he moved down an old road to check a known elk crossing. Once again, he heard the same scream or howl. This time he attempted to determine the direction of the sound, but never heard it repeated. Later that day, the two hunters compared notes. His friend reported hearing the wood knocking sounds again that morning. When they discussed where the sounds originated, they realized both experiences seemed to be coming from roughly the same area. The hunters never found tracks or other evidence, but neither could explain the sounds they heard. The witness later stated that the howl closely resembled vocalizations associated with alleged Bigfoot recordings from Ohio and the Jemez Mountains of New Mexico. Encounter C. Faro Report, number 26460, Class A, near Red River, Taos County, New Mexico, July 9, 2009. On the morning of July 9, 2009, a husband and wife were preparing to leave a campground near Red River, New Mexico. It was approximately 4:50 a.m., well before sunrise. The couple had planned an early departure and were already awake inside their travel trailer. The wife was the first to notice something unusual. Looking toward the bedroom door, she saw what appeared to be a large figure standing outside. The privacy glass obscured details, but a dark silhouette was clearly visible. She immediately alerted her husband. When he looked toward the window, he could also see the shadow. The outline appeared to show a head, chest, shoulders, and part of an arm. Believing someone was standing outside the trailer, he retrieved a pistol from a nearby nightstand and began moving toward the main entrance. At the same time, his wife had the presence of mind to take several photographs through the window. She captured 3 images showing the silhouette. The husband then opened the trailer door while simultaneously turning on the outside light. To his surprise, nothing was there. No person, no animal, nothing. Moments later, however, he heard what sounded like something moving quickly away into the darkness. Once daylight arrived, the couple examined the area around the trailer. They noticed what appeared to be unusually large tracks in the gravel and photographed them as well. The campsite sat only about 20 feet from the Red River, with dense forest covering the steep mountainside across the water. Later, when the photographs were enlarged and examined, the witness's photographer friend remarked that the shape resembled Harry from Harry and the Hendersons. The witness remains uncertain about exactly what stood outside the trailer that morning, but the photographs and tracks left him convinced that something unusual had visited their campsite before dawn. These 6 reports represent only a small sample of the hundreds of encounters documented throughout New Mexico over the years. Whether these witnesses encountered an unknown animal, misidentified something in the darkness, or witnessed something truly extraordinary remains open to debate. What do you think? Are these reports evidence of Bigfoot, cases of mistaken identity, or something else entirely? Let us know in the comments, and if you've had your own unexplained encounter in the wilderness, we'd love to hear your story.
You won't believe what transpired 3 weeks ago in the mountains of northern Oregon. A search and rescue helicopter crew captured footage of something that defies explanation. The pilot has yet to sleep soundly since that day, and the 2 hunters accompanying him can hardly speak about it without trembling. The incident began on a Tuesday morning when a 28-year-old hiker failed to return from what was supposed to be a straightforward overnight camping trip in the Cascade Range. His girlfriend had dropped him off at the trailhead on Sunday afternoon, and he was expected to call her Monday evening once he reached the other side of the mountain. When Tuesday morning passed without any word, she contacted the local sheriff's office. The missing hiker was experienced in wilderness survival and well equipped with proper gear, GPS, and emergency supplies. By Tuesday afternoon, the sheriff had assembled a ground search team, but the rugged landscape made effective coverage nearly impossible on foot. The forest extended for miles in every direction, interspersed with steep ravines and rocky outcroppings that could completely conceal a person. After hours of searching without any sign of the missing hiker, the decision was made to deploy helicopter support. The pilot had over 15 years of experience in search and rescue missions and had encountered nearly everything the mountains could throw at him. He had rescued injured climbers from cliff faces, located lost hunters during blizzards, and found hikers who had strayed miles off trail. Yet, nothing in his extensive career had prepared him for what he was about to see. Whatever was living in this cave had been there for quite some time. They could hear sounds echoing from deep within, the scraping of claws, heavy footsteps, and what sounded almost like primitive vocalizations. It was clear the creature was inside, and it was active. The sounds reverberated off the cave walls, making it hard to determine exactly how far the tunnel system extended. The pilot lingered at the cave entrance while the hunters prepared to go inside. His fear was almost immobilizing. Everything about the situation went against his training and instincts. Yet the hunters reminded him that the missing hiker's life depended on their actions. Within the next few minutes, one of the hunters volunteered to scout ahead, while the other stayed near the entrance. He moved cautiously into the cave, a small flashlight in hand to light the way. The tunnel sloped downward and curved to the right, vanishing into darkness beyond the reach of his beam. After just a few minutes, the scout returned, his face pale with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. He had found signs of human activity deeper inside, the scattered remains of camping gear, torn clothing, and what appeared to be a makeshift prison area created by piling rocks to block off a small side chamber. Most importantly, he had heard a faint, desperate voice calling for help from somewhere further within the cave system. The missing hiker was alive, though his voice was faint and filled with distress. Its method of carrying the body indicated remarkable strength. Despite the heavy load of a grown man and the rugged terrain, it showed no signs of exhaustion or struggle. As they tracked it, the hunters began to notice other unsettling details through their binoculars. The forest floor along the creature's path bore signs of frequent use: broken branches at unusual heights, compacted earth in spots that should have remained undisturbed, and crude trail markers constructed from stones and sticks. This creature had been using this route regularly. Eventually, it reached a destination at the base of a steep canyon wall. From above, they observed it slipping into what appeared to be a cave system carved into the rocky face. The entrance was partly concealed by overhanging vegetation, rendering it nearly invisible from the ground. But from their aerial perspective, they could see that the cave entrance appeared smaller at first glance, but was actually much larger, easily capable of fitting the enormous creature. When it reacted to the hiker's voice with clicking sounds, it seemed to be communicating with the person inside. This realization fundamentally altered the nature of the encounter. The creature wasn't holding the hiker captive in the traditional sense. It was protecting him, but from what? And why wouldn't it let them help? These questions would have to wait, as time was rapidly running out for the injured man inside the cave. During a brief lull in the standoff, when the creature turned slightly to respond to another call from the hiker, one of the hunters seized the opportunity to slip around the side of the cave entrance. He moved with the stealth born from years of hunting, using natural rock formations and shadows to conceal his approach. The creature's focus remained on his companions, and it didn't notice the flanking maneuver. Carefully navigating through the darkness, the hunter made his way into the cave system along a route the creature couldn't see from its position. The entrance he discovered was narrow and partially concealed, likely a secondary opening used by the creature for ventilation or as an escape route. It required him to squeeze through a gap between two large rocks, but it provided access to the cave system without disturbing the guardian at the main entrance. Something about its behavior suggested it might be capable of reasoning. It wasn't attacking recklessly. Instead, it appeared to be trying to understand their intentions and communicate its own. The creature began producing a variety of sounds, clicks, grunts, and vocalizations that varied in pitch and rhythm. Initially, the men thought it might be calling to others of its kind, but gradually they realized the sounds were directed at them. The creature seemed to be attempting communication through a complex system of vocalizations that resemble language rather than mere animal noises. When the pilot accidentally kicked a small stone, causing it to clatter across the rocky ground, the creature immediately turned toward the sound. However, instead of reacting aggressively, it tilted its head in what seemed to be curiosity. It emitted a series of soft clicking sounds and gestured toward the stone with one massive hand, as if asking what had caused the noise. From deeper within the cave, they could faintly hear the distressed voice of the missing hiker calling for help. The sound appeared to upset the creature, which turned toward the voice and issued what seemed like warning calls. However, the tone was not threatening. It resembled more a parent soothing a frightened child. The creature then looked back at the three men and gestured toward the cave, as if attempting to communicate something about the person inside. When they initiated their distraction, the response from inside the cave was swift and terrifying. A thunderous roar erupted from the depths, unlike anything any of them had ever heard. It was more intense and powerful than a bear's growl, yet it carried an intelligence and fury that seemed unmistakably human. The creature was angry and coming to investigate. Heavy footsteps reverberated through the cave system, growing louder with each passing second as it moved closer to the entrance. In the darkness beyond their flashlights, the hunters saw a massive shadow shifting. When the creature finally emerged at the cave mouth, all three men froze in terror. It was even larger than it appeared from the helicopter. Standing upright, it reached an easy 9 feet tall, with shoulders nearly 4 feet wide. Its entire body was cloaked in thick, dark brown fur, except for its face, hands, and feet, which revealed leathery, dark skin underneath. Its arms were disproportionately long, hanging nearly to its knees when upright. But what was most disturbing was its face. Although clearly not human, it displayed an intelligence and awareness that was unmistakably humanoid. Its eyes were dark and calculating, studying the three men with what seemed to be tactical assessment rather than simple animal aggression. This creature was not just reacting, it was thinking, planning, and evaluating the threat they posed. The rescue was intense and nerve-wracking. The hunter had to carefully navigate a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers, following the sound of the hiker's voice while trying to avoid detection by the creature. The cave system was far more extensive than they had initially thought, with multiple levels and branches that could have hidden dozens of people. The secondary entrance led into a tight passage that sloped steeply downward. He had to use his flashlight sparingly to prevent any light from revealing his position to the creature. The walls were smooth, worn by years of water erosion, and the floor was covered with a layer of soft earth that muffled his footsteps. As he ventured deeper into the tunnels, he began to realize the sophistication of the creature's domain. The passages weren't random, but appeared to have been deliberately shaped and enhanced over time. The pathways had been cleared of loose rocks, and natural ledges in the rock walls had been organized with what appeared to be stored supplies, roots, berries, and other food items, carefully arranged and preserved. The air inside the caves was unexpectedly fresh, indicating a sophisticated ventilation system that drew air from multiple openings on the surface. The temperature remained steady and comfortable, making the cave system an ideal refuge from the harsh mountain weather. It was evident that the creature had lived here for a long time and had made significant modifications to create a suitable, long-term habitat. Everywhere he looked, he found signs of the creature's intelligence. Tool marks on the walls where passages had been widened or smoothed. Primitive yet effective drainage systems carved into the floors to divert water away from living spaces, and even more advanced features, like a series of reflective surfaces made from polished metal objects, likely lost or stolen items from campers, used to redirect light from the entrance deeper into the cave.
Seema's scream woke Lisa and Edic, and they ran out of the tent to see what was happening. They saw a terrifying sight, a yeti dragging Seema by the leg into the darkness of the forest. The creature was huge and terrifying, its muscular body glistening in the faint light of the campfire and its eyes glowing bright red lights. Lisa and Edic screamed in horror as they saw their friend dragged into the forest. They knew they had to act quickly to save him. Without thinking, they started throwing everything they had at hand at Bigfoot. They threw wood, rocks, cans of canned food, anything that could hurt the creature. Bigfoot stopped for a moment. This gave Lisa and Edic a chance to get closer to Seema, who was lying unconscious on the ground. They grabbed him and tried to pull him away from the yeti, who was already approaching them again. They continued to back away, never taking their eyes off the horrible creature. Bigfoot was furious, his eyes glittering with rage, and he was ready to attack anyone who got in the way of his prey. When a headlight showed in the distance, the Yeti turned with a sudden movement and darted deep into the forest, disappearing from sight.
A terrifying encounter with a Yeti in the forest changes everything.
They saw a terrifying sight, a Yeti dragging Seema by the leg into the darkness of the forest. The creature was huge and terrifying, its muscular body glistening in the faint light of the campfire and its eyes glowing bright red lights. Lisa and Eric screamed in horror as they saw their friend dragged into the forest. They knew they had to act quickly to save him. Without thinking, they started throwing everything they had at hand at Bigfoot. They threw wood, rocks, cans of canned food, anything that could hurt the creature. Bigfoot stopped for a moment. This gave Lisa and Eric a chance to get closer to Seema, who was lying unconscious on the ground. They grabbed him and tried to pull him away from the Yeti, who was already approaching them again. They continued to back away, never taking their eyes off the horrible creature. Bigfoot was furious, his eyes glittering with rage, and he was ready to attack anyone who got in the way of his prey. When a headlight showed in the distance, the Yeti turned with a sudden movement and darted deep into the forest, disappearing from sight. We slowly started to go home. Around the beauty, fields in the distance and the village lights lit up, the forest is still snowy. Suddenly they see a man walking along the highway and kind of turns to them. Friends began to speculate. Oh, look, someone seems to have gotten lost out there. Why would he go to the forest at night? No, he's probably coming to us. Maybe his car broke down. Or asking for a ride. Blink his headlights, someone suggested to the driver. The driver blinked, and in the light of the headlights, the company saw that the man stood still for a moment and then rushed away from the road and ran toward the forest. He ran, he didn't run. His speed was inhuman considering that the snow was above his knees. Besides, it became clear to everyone that the stranger's height was not less than 2 and more meters. Without a word, the whole group rushed into the car, and the driver sped off with his foot on the floor. How long will it take him to come up behind us and attack us? We drove home at the maximum authorized speed, almost did not talk, and only looked out the window to see if a huge figure was rushing along the field parallel to the car. Suddenly, the engine of their car began to make a loud noise and then stopped. The couple and their children were stranded on an empty road in a wooded area in an inoperable car, which they barely managed to roll to the side of the road. Barry didn't consider himself a good mechanic, but he did open the hood of the car and started looking around. But at first glance, there was nothing to indicate that there was any breakdown. The nearest houses were no more than a mile away, and Barry decided he would have to get there on foot. We had a picnic blanket in the trunk, and I pulled it out. Then I went back to Elaine, who was sitting with our 2 kids, ages 4 and 6, who were still napping, and threw a blanket over them. I then told them to stay seated in the car, and I would go into town, find some other vehicle, and come back for them as soon as possible. The car will have to be left here and a mechanic will be called tomorrow. And at that moment, Elaine, who had looked at the road behind her husband's back, cried out loudly in fear. She saw a small creature run across the road not far from them. It was moving very fast, and Barry did not see it until it was almost over the curb. It was only at the last second that I saw it, but after it came another one, and then a third. Arya felt a bit uneasy when she heard a strange sound in the driver's speech, reminiscent of a snake. She tried to ignore it and continued the conversation, asking him about his profession and why he was in the neighborhood. However, the longer they talked, the more Arya got the feeling that something was wrong with this man. His eyes were too bright and piercing, as if they were sparkling with snake fire. And every time he finished a word, a low hissing sound reminiscent of a snake was heard. Arya felt her intuition saving her, and she decided not to relax and stay alert. As the conversation continued, Arya noticed that the man's appearance was too perfect. His face was without a single wrinkle, without a single pimple, as if it were a mask of perfection. The skin of his face was too white, as if he had never been in the sunlight. His gaze was fixed on her, as if he was trying to hypnotize her with his bright eyes. Arya sensed that something was wrong and began to worry. She tried to remain calm and continue the conversation, but her instincts told her to be wary. At that moment, the man suddenly turned his head toward her, his lips curved into a smile, but it was some kind of alien, eerie smile. Suddenly, the car slowed noticeably, beginning to shake and make strange noises. The driver took the keys out of the ignition and opened the hood to see what was wrong. Arya felt a lot of anxiety watching his actions. The driver concluded that there was an engine problem and he wouldn't be able to keep going. He offered Arya to wait for him here until he resolved the car problem. Arya firmly refused his offer, sensing that something was wrong with this man. "I'm sorry, but I won't wait here. I have a very important matter and I need to get to the city urgently. I'd rather walk," I said firmly, looking him straight in the eye. But the driver insisted, too rude and insistent. "You're staying here until I fix the car. You have nowhere to rush, and I'll definitely come back for you." I felt goosebumps run down my skin, and my instincts told me that this was an unusual situation. I was wary, and said firmly that I knew how to take care of myself and would rather walk. Her breathing was heavy and ragged, but she kept running without stopping. Gradually, the monster stayed behind, breathing deeply and looking around to make sure the danger was over. Arya sat at the desk in the medical office and looked out the window at the green meadows beyond. Suddenly, the door opened and a panting boy burst into the room with eyes full of terror. "Arya, I saw a monster in the swamp. It looks like a man, but it has a lizard head and a long tail," shouted the boy, barely breathing. Arya stared at him with her serious eyes and asked, "Are you sure you're not confused? Monsters only happen in fairy tales and movies." But the boy insisted on his words. "I saw him. I was running away when he appeared from behind the trees. You need to do something about this, Arya." Arya thought for a moment, then took the boy's hand and said, "Take it easy, dear. I'll check it out for myself. Don't worry, everything will be fine." She asked the boy to describe to her the exact spot where he had seen this monster, and went to the swamp to verify the information. As Arya approached the place where the boy said, but saw nothing, Arya ended up in the library a few days after the monster in the swamp incident. She was walking between shelves of books when suddenly her gaze fell on one book with the mysterious title, Reptoid. On the way back, Lisa couldn't forget about the mysterious figure they had seen on the road the day before. She felt that someone was watching them and they couldn't relax even for a minute. When they returned to the camp, they found that everything was in its place, but the atmosphere was tense and filled with fear. They lit a fire to ward off the darkness and ominous shadows, but Lisa still could not rest. Seema sat by the fire, carefully observing the world around him. It had been a long night, and he began to feel fatigue coming over him. His eyes began to droop, his thoughts began to drift, and his strength waned, but he dared not let himself rest, for the safety of his friends depended on him. He still sat staring into the fire, trying to stay awake. But the fatigue was stronger, and after a while his eyes closed, and in his head sounded one thought, "Just for a moment, just for a moment." Seema was suddenly awakened by a strange growl coming from far away. His heart sank with fear and he opened his eyes, scarcely realizing what was happening. And now, in front of him, recognizable in the twilight of the forest, stood a huge yeti, a creature from legends and scary stories. The day her grandmother died, Arya felt a strong desire to become a doctor. Arya realized that if she knew how to give first aid to her grandmother, she might have been able to save her. From that moment on, Arya decided that she would study and become a doctor to save lives and help people. She realized that it would not be an easy path, but she was ready for difficulties and trials. That night, sitting by the window and looking at the stars, Arya vowed to herself that she would fight for her dream of becoming a doctor to save lives and prevent the loss she experienced with her grandmother. Every day, Arya studied hard, read books about medicine, helped her mom on the farm, and dreamed of a future where she could help people and make their lives better. Although there may have been difficulties and obstacles on the way to her dream, Arya was confident that she could overcome all challenges and become a doctor to save lives. After successfully passing her exams and getting into medical school, Arya studied hard without wasting a minute of time. She was one of the brightest and most talented students. She had high grades and a great passion for medicine. After graduating from university and earning her medical degree, Arya decided to return to her village to help her mother and other residents. She got a job at the local hospital, where she became a valued specialist and everyone's favorite doctor. The impact was brutal. Everyone around them seemed to freeze. The windows shattered, making scratchy noises. Branches were flying everywhere and darkness enveloped the car. The driver, Eric, suffered serious head injuries. Blood was quickly pouring down his face, but he was still conscious. The friends, frightened and stunned, climbed out of the car and rushed towards him. Panic gripped them, but they needed to act urgently. They tried to stop the bleeding by pressing something that resembled first aid supplies to the wound. Seema, shaking with fear and, of course, the terrible accident, pulled his cell phone out of his pocket and tried to call the emergency services. But alas, in the sweltering field not far from the forest, communication was almost non-existent. He tried raising his hand and holding the phone as close to the sky as possible in hopes of getting a signal. But the effort was futile, and he was just about to climb down from the tree when he suddenly picked up a faint signal. "Hang on, friends, I'm going to try to make a call," shouted down to his companions who were still trying to help the accident-stricken driver. Seema tried dialing the emergency number again, and this time it took an especially great effort to keep the phone in the working area. His heart was pounding even harder when he heard the distant voice of the operator on the other end of the wire. Asterisk, "Emergency services, what's your problem?" he heard the operator's voice say. "We've been in an accident." Seema realized that they needed to find more firewood to keep the fire going and keep warm. He decided to go for firewood in the woods, taking Lisa with him. They took lanterns and a small spear to protect themselves in case of danger. Seema was determined and fearless. Despite all the threats of the forest and the mysterious events of the previous night, they moved in silence, following the tracks on the snowy path, the lantern light reflecting off the snowy hills and giving an indistinct illumination. Lisa was tense. She felt that they shouldn't leave the camp for too long. Seema moved decisively. He confidently chose the path, guided by his instincts and experience. Suddenly they heard a strange noise behind their backs, and both of them stopped on the spot. Asterisk. What was that? Lisa whispered, turning her gaze to the pitch blackness of the forest. Asterisk? I don't know, but we should be more careful, Seema said, putting his arm around the girl's shoulder. They moved on, but every rustle, every smell, every movement put them on alert and vigilant. They gathered some large firewood and decided to head back to camp, not risking staying in the forest any longer. Arya realized that she had been through a real nightmare, and that reptiloids existed for real, not just in fairy tales and movies. She realized that this encounter would change her life forever, and her determination to become a doctor to help people only grew stronger. She knew there were forces of evil and danger in the world, and she needed to be prepared for them. Arya quickly made it to the nearest village, where she called the police and described the incident in detail. She described the man, his car, and any strange details she noticed. The police assigned a search and began to investigate. When the car with the man was not found, everyone was shocked. Arya, as a doctor, was a respected member of her community, and she was believed without question. She was sure it was a reptiloid, and she was prepared to prove it by any means necessary. The locals were shocked by the event and supported Arya in her beliefs. They were grateful for her bravery and determination. But the search was fruitless, and the car with the man remained on the side of the road as a mute witness to the mysterious accident. Its goal is to control and subjugate humanity, and it is willing to do anything to achieve that goal. Its presence fills the air with an ominous aura of terror, and anyone who meets its gaze feels that the apocalypse has arrived. Arya, after reading the description of reptiloids in the book, felt mixed feelings. On the one hand, she was surprised that there appeared to be such strange creatures resembling monsters from fairy tales. On the other hand, she thought, none of this could be true. After all, the reptiloids are just a fairy tale, a fantasy creature, and it probably has nothing to do with the real world. Arya decided that it was better not to believe in such stories and to continue living her normal life, dedicating herself to her work and helping people. Arya got up early in the morning to make it to town in time to get the medicine she needed. Her plans were a little disrupted by the canceled bus, but she was not discouraged and decided to walk through the swamps. The road wasn't the easiest, but Arya wasn't afraid of hardship. Hearing sounds from the back, she turned around. Arya looked in the direction of the sound of the engine with surprise and saw a brand new foreign car slowly pulling up to her. The driver of the car opened the window and asked if she needed help. Arya happily agreed to the offer and gratefully got into the car. Stories about trolls first emerged in the Scandinavian countries, and each had its own. Norwegian, Swedish, and Danish, and later they appeared even in the distant Faroe Islands. And the biggest trolls come from Iceland. According to legends, these creatures have always frightened the locals with their appearance and witchcraft abilities. They lived everywhere, in castles, underground palaces, caves, forests, or under bridges. People had much to fear. Some hostile trolls were dangerous enemies, strong and cruel. They caused a lot of torment and misery to villagers, lured people to their deaths, or stole sleeping babies from their beds. The troll is an insidious trickster who lives in constant darkness and attacks defenseless settlements at night. In Norway, it was believed that trolls are strikingly different from each other in appearance and character. Some of them are giants, others are tiny creatures. Some are friendly to humans, others, on the contrary, burn them with real anger. But they also share some common features, at least in appearance. A large hooked nose, 4 fingers on each hand and foot, disheveled hair, and a tail that looks more like a cow's. Seema, Lisa, and Edik were shocked at what had happened. But thanks to their friends and the rescue service, they managed to escape the scary creature. The emergency services were stunned by what had happened. They administered first aid to the injured Seema, and then helped the entire trio to the hospital for further evaluation and treatment. Zemo was seriously injured after being hit by the Yeti, but was stabilized and under the care of doctors. Lisa and Edik were shocked by the horrible incident they had experienced. It was hard for them to believe that they had encountered a creature from legends, but they are grateful to Seema, who was able to lead them to the rescue. They all owe their lives to the emergency services who arrived at the right time to prevent the tragedy. It was completely. We gathered enough wood to make a fire and headed back to the car. On the way back, we discussed what to do next. When we got back to the car, we saw that Edik was still in bad shape. We made a fire and covered Edik with a blanket and waited for help to arrive. The night was cold and dark, but we knew that together we could survive any ordeal. We kept talking, joking, holding each other's hands so we wouldn't lose hope. The night was long and tense. Lisa and I took turns staying with Edik to monitor his condition and provide him with the help he needed. The light from the fire flickered, casting shadows on the trees around us, creating an atmosphere of mystery and enigma. We tried to quiet our fears by telling each other different stories, joking around, and trying to keep an upbeat spirit. But knowing that somewhere in the darkness lurked that mysterious figure seen on the road made us anxious and worried. We listened to every rustle, every barking of neighboring animals, every noise from the wind, and our hearts beat harder and harder. The night seemed like an eternity, and we waited for help to arrive, realizing that it was our only chance to survive and return home. She deducted some useful information. They are forced to take on a human appearance so as not to frighten the population. Reptiloids, by the way, are creatures that are related in some ways to our lizards and crocodiles. This is where the name came from. They have cold blood, have tails, claws, and sharp teeth. But things like conscience, compassion, humor are not available to them. Reptiloid aliens have the following features: taller than average, brightly and G. They have rubbery sexual features, insensitivity to heat, extraordinary physical strength, strange eyes with narrow pupils. They look nothing like humans, but they can transform their form to look almost human. A reptiloid is a non-human creature with petal-sharp skin covered in scales, resembling a giant lizard or dragon. His eyes emit fiery rays. He has supernatural strength and speed, the ability to shapeshift and penetrate walls. His cruel mind and aggressive behavior make him deadly to anyone who happens to be near him. So a few years ago on March 8th, Seema and her friends decided to meet and celebrate the holiday. The place for the picnic was chosen near the town of Bogorodsk, Nizhny Novgorod region. Imagine, early spring, the snow is lying in high drifts. Closer to the forest, it was covered with waist-high snow, but the friends were lucky. They saw an exit from the highway to a flat spot. Apparently, there was road equipment there, so the snow was cleared. It turned out to be quite cozy here, and it was close to the forest, not far from the road, and there was no one around. They took out appetizers, a little wine. Important point, the company is sober, the driver did not take alcohol at all, the ladies symbolically for the holiday. The goal was to meet and socialize, talking, joking, and congratulating. They didn't notice how the evening crept up. Aria grew up in a small village called Glenville. In this village lived simple people who were farmers. Aria's family lived in an old cottage that had been in need of repair for a long time. The girl's father's name was Jake. He was a kind and caring father, but misfortune did not bypass him and he died of cancer, leaving the family penniless. Aria's mom, whose name was Ellie, worked from morning till night on the farm to feed the family. The family didn't have enough money for anything, sometimes having to make do with bread and water. Her maternal grandmother, whose name was Margaret, was the only source of warmth and comfort for Aria. She told her granddaughter old fairy tales and taught her how to bake the most delicious pies. One day, Grandma started to feel sick and her mom called an ambulance. Aria stood by her side, not knowing what to do, and tried to soothe and comfort her grandmother. But magic words and affectionate touches didn't help. Her grandmother died of suffocation, and it was a difficult experience for Aria. That day, the house became quiet and empty. Aria was left alone with her mom, but the feeling of loss never left her. She realized that now she would have to be strong and cope with all the problems herself, but she didn't lose hope and believed that things would change for the better in the future. As Aria approached the place where the boy said but saw nothing, Aria ended up in the library a few days after the monster in the swamp incident. She was walking between shelves of books when suddenly her gaze fell on one book with the mysterious title, Reptoid. She couldn't help herself and took the book with her to read at home. After conducting her duties at the hospital, Aria sat down in her cozy corner and began to read. Page after page, she immersed herself in the fascinating world of fantastical creatures, and lo and behold, she came across a chapter describing creatures called reptoids. These creatures lived in deep forests and swamps, had a lizard-like skull, and their bodies were covered with scales similar to those of reptiles. Aria realized that the description of the monster from the boy's story matched the description of the reptoids. In their caves, mountain trolls hid untold treasures, gold and precious stones, and were very fond of bragging to people about their accumulated wealth. According to legend, on the darkest nights, they would raise their crystal palaces on golden columns to the surface and roll out huge chests, opening them and slamming the lids shut in an attempt to attract the attention of random travelers. Though one would hardly want to see them, eyes wide open, mouths wide open, noses swollen, sniffing for human scent. The trolls who lived under bridges were a specialty. As a rule, they were loners who built a bridge for themselves and charged anyone who wanted to cross it. They differed from their fellow creatures in their indifference to the sun's rays. The only way to kill these creatures was to destroy their bridge, a carefully guarded shrine. There is also a belief that trolls can sometimes leave an old bridge to start building a new one. It happened on an early winter morning in 1975. Spouses Barry and Elaine were traveling with their 2 young children to the village of Slitting Mill in Staffordshire, UK. They were returning home after Christmas holidays spent in the neighboring town of Penkridge. Even though the reptiloid could never be found, Aria was certain that it existed. She became more alert and cautious, knowing that there were dangers in the world that needed to be considered. Her experience was a reminder that doctors not only heal bodies but also fight dark forces, protecting their patients from evil and pain. Although the mystery of the reptiloid remained unsolved, Aria was convinced that there are more things in this world than we can imagine. She continued her work as a doctor, helping people and bringing them hope and healing. Her determination and courage made her a true hero in the eyes of her community, and she was willing to fight for the well-being and safety of all who needed her help. According to legends, these creatures have always frightened the locals with their appearance and witchcraft abilities. Some hostile trolls were dangerous enemies, strong and cruel. They caused a lot of torment and misery to villagers, lured people to their deaths, or stole sleeping babies from their beds. The troll is an insidious trickster who lives in constant darkness and attacks defenseless settlements at night. It happened on an early winter morning in 1975. Spouses Barry and Elaine were traveling with their 2 young children to the village of Slitting Mill in Staffordshire, UK. They were returning home after Christmas holidays spent in the neighboring town of Penkridge. Suddenly, the engine of their car began to make a loud noise and then stopped. The couple and their children were stranded on an empty road in a wooded area in an inoperable car, which they barely managed to roll to the side of the road. And at that moment, Elaine, who had looked at the road behind her husband's back, cried out loudly in fear. She saw a small creature run across the road not far from them. It was moving very fast, and Barry did not see it until it was almost over the curb. It was only at the last second that I saw it, but after it came another one, and then a third. It's hard for me to describe what they looked like, but it was a rather hairy troll. It was early morning, and the moon was hanging over the road, and we could see these creatures clearly in the moonlight. They looked like little men with humps on their backs and large downward curved noses. We definitely remember that these creatures were there. Barry says that he and his wife are now in their 60s, but they still feel uncomfortable recalling the event, and they still don't remember how their encounter with the hairy trolls ended. But we know what we're talking about. These things happened and we remember them. The children, fortunately, didn't remember anything, but we do remember details of what they looked like. They all had hair. They were something like trolls or goblins, and they were completely real. Neither Elaine nor I ever encountered anything paranormal again afterward, but the event was forever etched in our hearts. This story has another fascinating detail. The village of Slitting Mill and nearby Penkridge appear in several other eyewitness accounts as places where people have seen large, hairy humanoid creatures, British Bigfoots. On February 18, 1995, near Slitting Mill, a woman named Jackie Hogton saw a huge, clumsy creature covered in hair from her car. Jackie even had to turn the steering wheel sharply to the side. She almost collided with this giant when he suddenly stepped into the road only 6 meters away from the car. And considering that the woman was driving at high speed, it's a miracle that she did not hit the outlandish creature. Tall, thickly covered with hair, with 2 glowing red eyes. Trolls can also take the form of a dog, a black goat, or a friendly man with a tail. On the heads of monsters, in addition to hair, usually grow moss grass, bushes, and even trees. And sometimes there were different numbers of heads. The more heads, the older the troll. And not only older, but also more attractive, as the abundance of heads lured the creatures of the female sex, which in Norway were called gugras. The longevity of trolls remains a mystery. They lived in the dense Norwegian and Swedish forests. They had relatives. In Iceland, they were called trolls there, as well as on the Shetland and Orkney Islands. Trolls hid their dwellings in mountain caves, inside hills, rock mounds, and even in burrows underground. Some preferred to live alone, sometimes occupying the space of an entire mountain, while others formed families or joined tribes. Some trolls formed kingdoms with a clear hierarchy and vertical authority. They built huge underground complexes with palaces and a system of labyrinths, such as in the Dovre Mountains, where the famous Peer Gynt, the hero of the play of the same name by Norwegian playwright Henrik Ibsen, visited.